Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we're back for another episode of Everybody's Got a Pod. And of course, I'm joined by the $1 million man himself, the Hall of Famer Ted DiBiase. Ted, what's going on, brother?
Not a whole lot, Marcus. How are you?
I'm doing well. I've missed you. I know that our listeners missed you last week. We wound up doing a YouTube best of, but you've had a lot going on. We were struck by a couple tragedies here in the wrestling world, and I know that you were off paying your respects, right?
Boy, I went to two funerals in a very short time. Terry Funk, who a lot of my closer friends and even the other guys in the business realized my relationship with him. It was more of a not just a wrestling mentor, but almost a brother. Terry Funk and his family and his brother as well. I've just, they've been like a family to me. And I knew he wasn't doing well, but I wasn't ready for him to die. And then, oh my gosh, if that's not bad enough, then I get word that my partner, Mike Rotunda's son, has a heart attack and dies. Just and that's like, and I got on a plane and I flew to Tampa and I went to his funeral, and it was sad. I mean, it really was. I talked to Mike briefly. Obviously, he was happy that I was there, but I wanted to give him a little room, before I called him again, because it's kind of like there's so much activity when you funeral, especially when you got a lot of people like in our business coming in from out of town and all that other stuff. I mean, Shane McMahon was there.
Wow.
Vince's son was there. And somebody told me that they saw Stephanie and Triple H, and, I was like, I don't know how I would have missed that, if they were, but anyway. That was, I guess anything was possible, but I went down there, and of course, another very good friend of mine, Steve Kern. He picked me up at the airport in Tampa, and I spent the night with him and his wife. We went to the funeral together. But Wyndham was just a great kid, man. I mean, he really was, and they were just getting ready to go back. They were supposed to start again in September. And start up something new with him, and now he's gone. Just, hey, you never know.
You never do know. And I mean, just a couple really difficult losses here, not just for wrestling, but really for the world. A couple really great guys, influential guys. And man, Wyndham, especially with the age that he was at and the potential he still had, the fact that he has young children at home, I mean, that's a tough loss.
Yes.
But Ted, I'm glad you were able to go and pay your respects and get to see some people. But there a minute ago you mentioned Steve Kern, and right here before we got recording, you told me a pretty interesting story about Steve Kern and some of the connectivity he has to you and your wife. And I was wondering if you could recount that for a little.
I would love to. I met Steve in Atlanta, and when he, this is the first time I went and wrestled for Georgia Championship Wrestling in 1981. And I think I might have gone in late 80, but it was in 81. So Steve and I hit it off, and, he comes to Georgia, and instead of renting an apartment, which is not a bad idea. If I'd been smart enough to do that, then maybe I would have, but he bought a house. So he made an investment. So he wasn't just paying rent every week. When he left there, he had a house to sell anyway. So, but his house was out in the Stone Mountain area of Atlanta. And he says, so why don't you move out here? get an apartment out here. And where I was down in like kind of South Atlanta, near the airport. Wasn't a really nice area anyway. And so I said, sure. So I found an apartment there. It's called Summit Creek Apartments. And so we could hook up and ride together more easily. So that was through that relationship. And I was actually with him the night his first child was born. Wow. So anyway, I'm sitting at the pool one day, and I see this pretty little girl walking around the pool in a bikini, and admired her from a distance. And then, obviously she was with a group of people, so you're not going to just walk up in there and go, hi there. I went back to my apartment. I took a shower, got cleaned up. I was going somewhere to wrestle. And it's funny. I got down to the one. If I turn left, I'm leaving the apartment complex. If I turn right, I'm going back towards the pool. I turn right. I go back. I park my car, and I'm talking to myself, and I'm going, Ted, this is probably about a stupid thing you've ever done. And so I'm walking around the pool, looking around as if I forgot something or I lost something, like maybe there's an outside chance I can meet this girl. And so Melanie told me later, she said, the guy who spoke up to me, he was the wrestling fan, and so he says to me, he says, hey, Ted, we've got a girl over here who wants your autograph. And he like, I guess it wasn't like a date, but like I guess a bunch of them all worked together at because she was a checkout at a grocery store. Anyway,
okay.
And so the girl over here wants your autograph. Says, hey, Mel, you'd like to have Ted's autograph, wouldn't you? And she wasn't even paying attention. Like she was in the pool with they were like, how when you get up on somebody's shoulders and they horse around, try to pull them down.
Like a chicken fight.
Yeah. And so she goes, autograph? She says, I've never had an autograph. She goes, yeah, here, sign my visor. And her visor was all wet. And even if it wasn't all wet, I said, well, this is not going to work. Your visor's all wet. But if you'll follow me in the office, I'm sure they have stationery. And so I go, I can't believe this is happening. And so Melanie follows me into the office, and I said, what's your name? And she said, Melanie, but everybody calls me Mel. I said, to Mel, the best looking girl at the pool for sure, triple exclamation points. And I dated it for 2681. I never did that ever. I mean, why would I date this autograph? It's like 4/26/81, April of 26, 1981.
Incredible.
And so she thanks me. She goes, what number are you? And I said, excuse me? She says, so you play for the Atlanta Falcons, don't you? She thought I was a football player. She had no idea. And I said, no, I'm not a football player. So why am I getting your autograph? I said, I'm a professional wrestler. And she goes, you mean like that fake stuff on TV? And Marcus, I think by now, that's the worst thing you could say to a professional wrestler, that fake stuff on TV. Yeah, it's prearranged, but if you understand what we do, it's not so fake. But
nothing fake about it.
Anyway, I said that. I said, you're probably the only person in the world who could ever say that to me and get away with it. And I said, yes, I'm one of those guys. And so I said, well, this autograph is going to cost you. And she says, what? I said, just your phone number. And she looked at me. She said, well, I'm not in the habit of giving perfect strangers my phone number. And I said, okay, I mean, I understand that. I said, but it's not like you don't know where I live, And I said, if you give me your phone number, I just, give you a call maybe. And she says, okay. So she gives me her phone number. And so I call her, and we made arrangements to meet back at the pool. And she told me later, she says, there was no way that I was just going to go out on a date with this guy that's 6'4", 240 pounds, without getting to know him better. And so that's why she said, why don't we meet at the pool? And so we met back at the pool. We spent the whole day there. And I said, so you want to go out for dinner tonight? And she says, yeah, sure. And so I think our first date was to Benihana's. Oh gosh. But that's how it all began. And I don't know. It's just, it was almost like we were inseparable after that every day.
A really cool history with you guys. And it's just
Yeah.
interesting that, without Steve Kern, you would have never met your wife.
Yeah. Yeah. That Steve, as a friend, it was just my buddy. He says, hey, you owe me a lot. I said, what do you mean? I said, if it weren't for me, you'd never met your wife.
Well, what else is interesting too is as you were telling me this story, you kind of wrapped it up by saying that, yeah, but then, whenever I moved back to Georgia, we moved into, you said it was her parents' house, right?
Yeah. I mean, she lived close to where that apartment complex was. And she would go there with friends that lived there or had connections there, and they would go there for the afternoon or whatever, as a group.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just on one of those days I happened to be at poolside, and the rest is fate. I keep thinking about that when I pulled out and I stopped, and I sat there for a minute. Do I go left and just blow it off and go to work, or nah? So I went back to the pool. I'm telling you, it was just meant to be. So
between that and the fact that you wrote down the date randomly is just really unique and cool. Like, what a pivotal moment in your life, and you just happen to have the wherewithal to write down the date and mark this day in your history, and you still have that note to this day, right?
Yeah, still have the autograph that I signed for. She's got in a frame hanging on the wall. So
unbelievable. And then and it transitions really well into our topic today, because you had said that whenever you guys moved back to Georgia there in 1983 that you lived together, and that's our topic, is when you moved back to Georgia, leaving Mid-South. We had spoken, gosh, last month now, or 2 months ago. It was 2 months ago about July 1983 in Mid-South. So we missed August because, last month was jam-packed here on the podcast, but we're making it up now. We're going to be talking about August and September of 1983 and your final matches in Mid-South and move back to the Georgia territory. I do want to give a shout out to John Alred for helping me locate some added information, because let me tell you, finding a lot of wrestling detail and nuance from this era was really difficult. They have a lot of stuff for the WWF from this time and before, but smaller territories, it just was not out there. So shout out to that guy, big help.
Well, and I hope I could be some help, because I'm going to be an old fart. Sometimes my memory is like, doing this podcast has helped me, because a lot of the stuff you're digging up, I'm going, oh yeah. I remember now.
Between the notes, and we've got 4 videos this week, we've got some visual and mental aids. So we'll get through this thing. Before we do get into the notes, though, I do want to remind our listeners to get over to youtube.com/@everybody's-got-a-pod and get subscribed. We've got stories that you will not hear on the podcast over there that we drop every single Monday as YouTube exclusive clips. We do giveaways over there. We have short little bite-sized videos from the podcast as well. So if you love what we're doing here, you're going to love our YouTube channel. Again, it's youtube.com/@everybody's-got-a-pod. So Ted, as July ends, Jim Duggan and Magnum TA pull off a victory and take away your Mid-South tag team titles, but that is not enough for our old pal Hacksaw. He also declares in the first week of August that he intends to run you out of Mid-South wrestling as well. As we will soon discuss, you are going to be leaving Mid-South to head over to Georgia and Japan. So Ted, the last look the WCW fans got at you was of you being stretchered off after 4 pile drivers from the Freebirds in March 1981. You had been enjoying some really incredible success here in Mid-South, though, during this run. Now you're looking to return to Georgia, and I know that last time you were in Georgia, it was you had actually struggled a little bit financially, to the point where you had told me that JYD had given you a little financial aid, and on your way back into Mid-South. So after experiencing this great success, you're like a red hot heel here in Mid-South. Why do you think you decided to make the return to Georgia? Was it money incentivized?
Well, I think one of the reasons, one of the things that may have played into this too is, of course, Melanie and I get married, and you know, in Georgia, I was home every night. I
Mm.
mean, we would go and wrestle and come back home. So I came back, slept in my own bed every night. Now, this wasn't the case in Mid-South. And so, I think some of my reason for going back was to take Melanie back to a place where she was comfortable. She knew her way around. She had friends, and that was, I'm sure that was one of my major reasons for going back. Plus, by this time, I think I'd gotten the deal in Japan. I didn't mind making less money in Georgia because going to Japan made up for it. And so I was making like 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 trips a year to Japan. And so when we went back to Atlanta, by this time Melanie's dad had retired, and they went back to Mississippi where her mother was raised. Her mother was raised in Crystal Springs, Mississippi, which is about 40 miles south of Jackson. And so, we went back, and instead of getting an apartment, we lived in the home Melanie basically grew up in. Her father was an executive with Sears. He went all over the country building Sears buildings. And he was like the guy in charge of all this stuff. But anyway, that's why we went back to Atlanta. But me going to Japan and then coming back and having more time that way, that helped a lot. So
Definitely makes sense. And yeah, especially if Bill Watts was running you really hard and maybe not really necessarily willing to negotiate, allowing you to get over there to Japan a few times a year. If George is willing to, you got to take advantage of opportunities like that, right?
yeah.
Now, do you recall if it would have been Jim? I know that Jim Barnett was going to be out the door here later in 1983, but I think at this time he was still there. Do you recall negotiating with him at all?
No. I don't think I ever had more than 2 conversations with Jim Barnett. Basically he was told, or Jim Barnett told whoever the booker was. And the booker at first was Ollie, but then when Ollie left and Robert Fuller came in, Jim Barnett told Robert Fuller, get Ted DiBiase over. There's a chance he could be the next NWA world champion. So Robert Fuller, in getting me over, got himself over because he made us a tag team. And, and of course, I like Robert personally, but he was a horrible booker.
Yeah, if I remember right, Jake and I had talked about this era a little bit, and Jake he comes in right around the same time as you would here, and by the time he wraps up the following year, he had been helping out with booking. We'll talk about Georgia again here in a few minutes, but let's quickly get caught up on August 1983 there in Mid-South. You're still teaming up with King Kong Bundy, and after scoring a pinfall against Tim Horner and Mr. Wrestling 2 with your loaded glove, you decide to try it again the next week against Magnum TA and Dr. Death, but Hacksaw interferes. He grabs the load from the glove and knocks you out with it, which allows Magnum to score the pinfall. Ted, Magnum TA was just a young man at this stage, but man, brimming with potential. Did you see that early box office in him?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like, it's hard to describe. It's kind of like I tell guys, even then when I go in, because a lot of times guys with independent organizations will have me come in if I happen to be in town and just share some stuff with their guys. And I tell them all, I said, mechanically, you might be great. You make the right moves, you do the right stuff. I said, but the one thing you can't give anybody is charisma. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, but you either have it or you don't. And, if you have it, then you can, I guess you can make it greater, by pouring it on, but you just can't give anybody charisma. I could see that in him. I could see that that he was destined to go places, and it's just a shame that that he had the accident that he did, because he'd have been big. He really would have been big.
Yeah, I think, Magnum is not necessarily considered like this great technical performer in the ring or anything of that nature. However, I mean, that look is irreplaceable. The attitude and the kind of aura that he has about him is irreplaceable. It's just he's just that guy. It was, I
Yeah,
mean, almost predetermined. You can even see it here. Like, okay, this guy's going to be a massive star.
yeah, yeah.
Well, Ted, I do also want to point out that you're not getting a ton of TV time here in August, and not even a single promo for the entire month of August. Do you recall if Watts was upset at all about you departing from the territory, or is this just standard stuff? If the guy's going to leave, keep him off TV.
Well, yeah. I mean, if Bill knows, obviously, if Bill knows I'm leaving, then why invest anything more in you if you're leaving? Bill Watts, in my estimation, is one of the brightest bookers and somebody who understands the psychology of what we do better than just about anybody I know. I mean, Bill's a brilliant guy. I mean, you don't have to speak with him very long to tell just how, I mean, she's really, he's got it.
Ted, another couple guys with some incredible charisma are coming in here to Mid-South. They were about to go on to be huge stars, but at this time they were brand new to the business. The Road Warriors are here on Mid-South TV on September 3rd, and they lose to Jim Duggan and Magnum TA by DQ. Ted, I'm guessing that this would have been your first time around them, because like I said, they were brand new. They had just debuted in Georgia here recently. What were your early impressions of them?
Gosh, I mean, a couple of really nice guys, but when they first started, I didn't have a whole lot of hope for them. I mean, obviously two great, big, unbelievably built guys. But I don't know. It was kind of like, but you know what? They eventually got it.
They would establish a great legacy here in pro wrestling. And so, I mean, like the builds like the two of those had at this time were kind of a new thing in pro wrestling, like these super muscular, giant, jacked up guys. I mean, at the time, are you like, okay, I guess this could be the direction that pro wrestling is moving in, where everybody's got to be this bodybuilder type, or what did you think?
I never thought that. I mean, I know that, but I know, well, Vince McMahon, Vince personally, I mean, he had in the new office in Stanford on the first floor. I mean, he has a gym in the office that would be like, you could walk into a Gold's Gym, and everything that's in Gold's Gym was in Vince's gym.
Wow. I
mean, that's how serious Vince was about training. And I remember one of the things he said to me, when I first signed with him, and it was going to be the $1 Million Man. He says, I want to see you. I said, I want to see you in the gym more. And I said, I got you. And I did. I never got to be, and I never, it's kind of like, even if you ever watched amateur wrestling, there's a lot of guys in amateur wrestling, they don't look like bodybuilders.
No.
And they're really wrestling. My dad had a pretty good build, but he wasn't, he didn't look like Joe Atlas. Now, obviously Vince liked that look, but it's kind of like, and I did make myself more visible in the gym, and I came along, but it was kind of like, I was old school.
Well, you were technique oriented, and fundamentals, and it worked, it worked for many years. I think that a lot of our fans are probably wondering, okay, if Hawk and Animal just made their debut in Georgia, what are they doing over here in Mid-South? Well, according to my research, one of Watts' first acts as owner of Mid-South was to withdraw any affiliation from NWA, but they still managed a loose relationship, which allowed crossovers like this to happen. So I know wrestling was kind of cutthroat at times, especially in the territory era. Do you have any idea how a relationship like this could have worked?
I don't know. I don't have a clue.
Yeah, it seems very uncharacteristic for somebody to say like, okay, well, we'll send our guys over there. It just must be an arrangement where they're like, yeah, we can kind of share guys and help each other out, even though we're not affiliated with one another. I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, I mean, I guess business wise, even if you're not affiliated with an organization, if you, I guess you could, you could have an understanding with, okay, if we want to make a little trade out here or there and now and then, we can, and again, like it's like, and one of the reasons that I was never the NWA world champion is I went back to work for Bill.
Right.
And Bill was not affiliated with the NWA. So, at the time that, when I first went to Georgia, it's because Terry Funk told me, go to Georgia, get on that TV and get over.
Mm-hmm.
He said, your name's in the hat for possibly being one of the next NWA world champions.
So, like, I know that, Jake says it all the time, and Jim has said it to me before, too. Like, having a belt is just like an extra thing you have to carry in your bag. It's like, you're not actually winning it is sort of the idea. However, I know that a lot of guys look at the NWA title as being this really prestigious belt. So, I mean, when you're coming back here in 1983 to Georgia, are you like, is that a goal of yours? Like, win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship?
The difference here is that if you're the NWA World Champion, you're going from territory to territory. And you're going to each territory and spending probably a week or maybe two, and then you go to another territory, all the territories that were affiliated with NWA. And then after you've gone to all those territories, then you start back and you go back in. So you only see a world heavyweight title match occasionally. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, you see the dang title matches every week. And to me, I'm sorry, but it weakens the value of the title.
Totally agree.
If you see a world title match every week, well, so what? But back then, you didn't see a world championship title match except maybe once every 3 months or 4 months. And being the NWA world champion, if you're that guy and you're traveling to all those territories and they're building up a particular baby face, because usually the NWA champion, the only place he was ever a baby face was just in his home territory. Mm. And for the Funks, that was Amarillo, and for Harley Race, it was Kansas City. For the Briscoes, it was Florida. But everywhere else they were heels and big money. That's if you're the NWA, it's not so much. That is like not all titles like. Like if I was I was like the North American champion for Bill Watts, and I've actually got a replica of that belt, and so I obviously I didn't defend it every week, but much more often than you would see a world championship.
Right.
And so what went along with that belt was a lot of money. Yeah. If you're the NWA world champion, you're making the big bucks.
So with all that being said, the idea of when you're getting back to Georgia is not necessarily it's your goal to win that NWA World Heavyweight Championship, but it is your goal to make as much money as possible, which might include winning that championship, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. And speaking of what makes sense, let's take a minute to discuss our fantastic sponsor, Blue Chew. Are you ready to perform with the confidence of the $1 Million Man in the bedroom? Are you ready to leave your partner feeling like $1 million? Are you ready to get that thing so hard you couldn't turn the head with a pipe wrench? If the answer to those questions is yes, it's time for you to give Blue Chew a try. Blue Chew can help you increase your performance and regain that old confidence where it counts the most. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready when the opportunity arises. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And here's the best part. It's all done online. Forget about those visits to the doctor's office. Forget about the awkward conversations, and no more waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made right here in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. But as we always say, there will be nothing discreet about your package. Men everywhere have never been more excited to see their mail carrier arrive, because when your package has arrived, your package has arrived. Listen, I know what your next question is, because it would be my next question. Will it actually work? Well, why don't you try it for free and find out for yourself? Something free from the $1 Million Man? That's right. You can try it right now for free. All you have to do is pay $5 shipping. Place your order now and give your partner a very pleasant surprise. Women are attracted to confidence, and Blue Chew can help give you confidence where it counts the most. Don't wait any longer. Chew it and do it. Take advantage of our special deal. Again, you can try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code EGAP at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com, promo code EGAP to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring Everybody's Got a Pod. Well, so on the same episode where the Road Warriors come in, you're going to address Jim's interference in your match the prior week by issuing a challenge. That'll be our first clip this week.
People out there know that Ted DiBiase has been the big cheese, the main man in Mid-South Wrestling for over 2 years. And this thing with Hacksaw Duggan and I has come to a boil. I've had it right up to here with you, Duggan. All these cheap victories that you're claiming over me. Outside interference. What happened here last week on television was the icing on the cake, Duggan. I want to settle this thing once and for all. You've interfered with my lifestyle, everything I do. You've interfered with my pocketbook, Duggan. Right here on television. It's you or me. I want it here right here next week. And if I don't beat you, Duggan, I'll pack my bag and I'll leave Mid-South.
So there it is. The seeds are planted, and pretty funny here. What really stood out to me was that you referenced money, and I mean, with what's to come here for your career, it's just amusing that would be kind of the
Yeah, you're affecting my pocketbook, Duggan.
Right. So it just kind of works perfectly. I know that you and Jim are close, so it had to be pretty nice getting to wrap up your run here in Mid-South with your pal, right?
Oh yeah. Jim and I have become very good friends, and we still are to this day. So, yeah, it was kind of like. But when I was there when Jim first started. Oh my gosh, he's hot off of the football field. You know, he had just come out of the NFL.
Yep.
And it's kind of like you had to remind him every now and then that it's a work. You know, we're not really punching each other.
I've heard
loosen up, Jim. Loosen up.
I've heard the same thing about Dr. Death when he first came around. Like guys.
Yeah, Doc too. Yeah.
Oh man, a couple big rough dudes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, so speaking of wrapping up, that's what we're going to do here in pretty chaotic fashion. Let's check out the end of your Loser Leaves Town, or rather your Loser Leaves Mid-South match here for our second clip this week.
I've never heard of Jim. He reversed it. He's got DiBiase's figure four reversed. He reversed DiBiase's figure four. DiBiase's in pain now. The referee asking DiBiase. There's the Road Warriors. Boyd. The Road Warriors are pounding. They're pounding Dugan. The Road Warriors are pounding Dugan. Looks like DiBiase had himself a safety valve, a backup. Now look at them, they're holding it. They're holding Dugan. Dugan's fought to his feet. Now they're holding for DiBiase. Look at DiBiase. He's got the both of them holding. He's slapping Dugan. The worst insult. He's slapping Dugan. He's slapping him. Ted DiBiase's taunting and slapping him. Jim Dugan's helpless with the two powerful. Here goes Magnum TA and Rick Rude, but the Road Warriors catch him coming. Now DiBiase picks Jim Dugan up to put the coup de grace on him. DiBiase picks him up to put the coup de grace on him. DiBiase loads up. Got the junkyard dog.
There's a dog.
There's the junkyard dog. Oh, gosh, he splattered DiBiase. The Road Warrior got him.
The back, front, everything that's available, the dog is putting it on him, Bill.
But the Road Warrior's got dog from behind. Now DiBiase's got the board. DiBiase's got that board, and it looks like he's going to put JYD out. Looks like DiBiase's going to really tee off on
Dugan made it!
Dugan speared him. Dugan speared him, boys. Now Dugan's got the board.
Now tide has turned.
Oh, boy. Boy, look at that. Dugan is putting it to him. King Rat's getting it. Look at JYD's pitching. And Dugan's going to be hitting home runs. Boy, I can't believe the action here.
The dog threw him in, and Dugan laid it on him. A home run for Hacksaw Jim Dugan.
And now Ted DiBiase's got it. No disqualification, boys. No disqualification. Well, there it is. 1, 2. Trey Bogan, Dugan wins. Dugan the winner.
Dugan threw the board down and jumped right on him.
Dog. Look at the hard dog is hurt. You can still see how hurt dog is, but his heart came. He couldn't let Dugan go down to that kind of beating. Ted DiBiase, by his own words, will have to pack his bag and leave Mid-South.
That's it. The end of another run in Mid-South. How about that?
What month was that? Do you remember?
That is September of 1983. So 40 years ago around this time.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Man.
Yeah, probably the first time you've ever seen that back, I would guess.
It's been a long time. Yeah.
It's funny. My brother. What was that?
I said, I guess I looked a lot different then. Yeah, so like it's like, and now we're back to the I'm going.
It's funny. My brother and I were just talking about this. How like a lot of the wrestling that we would see back in the day, you would see it once, and that's it. So we grew up during the Monday Night Wars era. We would see Nitro or Raw, and then okay, that's it, and it's just a memory. They don't really do replays. They'll do like a replay that night, but there was no WWE Network, so like it's got to be interesting for you seeing a lot of these old clips from Mid-South, because I would guess that most of them probably you haven't gone out of your way to find on the internet.
No. I mean, I guess they're there, right?
Yep, they're out there.
Yeah. I wonder who owns all that. I know, I know Bill made a lot of money selling his stuff. I think
he did. So it wound up going to Turner. Eventually bought all the Mid-South stuff, and then Vince bought Turner. So all of it is owned by WWE now.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
But so, I mean, here you go. You're about to go debut on that Turner TV in Georgia. Any hesitance to leave Mid-South behind after this really crazy successful run that you had, or is it just kind of the name of the game? You move on to different territories.
Well, it was, I mean, I think it was more of a move, a family move, again, I mean, it's like, Melanie and I got married, like I said, New Year's Eve, 81. And I was in Mid-South all that time. So this is 83. And now I'm going to go back to Georgia. And I really went back to Georgia more, I think for my marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wanted her, to be around some of her old friends and things like that, and just to, not with me gone all the time. I mean, you think about that. I mean, we get married, she doesn't know wrestling, and you can explain it to him, but hey, I was home every night in Georgia, and it was just, I think I needed that again, for a while, because just Mid-South was just wow. You weren't gone every night, but there were a lot of nights you were gone, and so now we're back in Georgia, and what I am doing, again, which takes me away, is trips to Japan. I would be like, you would go to Japan, you're gone 3 total weeks or sometimes 5 total weeks, before you get home. The money's real good, but you're gone.
Right.
So, because I had hoped, and we had, I believed that if she went back to Atlanta, she still had a lot of friends there. Well, she still had a lot of friends there, but all of her friends were still single. And she, it's kind of like when you're married now and you have a child to take care of, everything changes.
Yep.
So ultimately we went back to Mid-South.
Yeah, you've said here on the show before, it's kind of like, and no matter where you would stray, you kind of always gravitated back toward Mid-South eventually. It might be a silly question, Ted, but I think it's worth asking. Do you think that Watts would have given you a little extra money for your final appearance here? Let me justify that question. It kind of feels like he'd want to maintain a good relationship with you and leave the door wide open for a possible return to his territory. Would that have been common practice back in those days, or not so much?
Yeah, not so much. I don't think so. I mean, it was like those were the days where, the promoters, they had you by it's like, if you want to work for me, okay. And there was no written contract, I mean, of course I could have I just, said, screw you, I'm leaving and left, but then I would have never been able to go back.
Right.
But but nobody had contracts like that back then.
I think that's an interesting note for our fans here. I mean, here you are, you're doing the job for Duggan on the way out the door, which is the right way to do business.
Yeah.
But like, you didn't have to. Nothing was forcing you to do that. You're just doing it because it's the right thing to do, right?
Yeah, I mean it's the right thing to do, and relationship wise, with Bill. I mean, you don't want to be a hard butt, but I'm leaving the territory, so why not?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's like, why, it's kind of like if I'm leaving, then, do I, why not do the favor for somebody that's going to help promote them and move that organization forward, because I always know that, down the road I can come back, and I'll have that same relationship with the boss and when I come back, then I start winning again.
Right. The right thing to do, not just for Bill Watts, but also your buddies with Jim Duggan. So why not put him over and make you look good?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like what's best for business.
Mm-hmm.
And the too many guys, get their own personal thing. It's like, like wrestling is a business, and you got to do what's right for business. And it's like it's not always about what's, best for you. Necessarily. Of course, it depends on where you are on that, on the ladder. Are you a top guy? Are you a middle guy? Are you an opener? All those things play into it.
You arrived at GCW to take on Joe Lightfoot following your Mid-South departure, and I have the final moments of the match and the post-match interview as our next clip this week.
DiBiase up on that second rope. Catching the back of the elbow, being driven back to the canvas again. And DiBiase very much in control of things at this particular moment. Irish whip into the far turnbuckle, and it's Lightfoot. Good reversal by Lightfoot, and Lightfoot. He's not down, and he's not out, and those tomahawk shots are taking their toll.
Using that hand to good advantage, Gordon, because Lightfoot looked like he had him going, and then that hand came up, and Lightfoot was down.
Oh, I should be very curious to find out some information. Beautifully executed power slam. Beautifully executed power slam. Can't argue that at all. Really can't. We're going to see that again in slow motion. You'll see what we're talking about with this perfectly executed power slam. Watch DiBiase. Whip off the rope, scoops him coming off, and notice the perfect coordination of body and mind here as he brought him down into a perfect power slam and scores the pinfall. Well, Ted DiBiase has joined me, and may I first of all welcome you back to World Championship Wrestling. It's been quite a while.
Well, Gordon, it's always a pleasure to come back where the action is, and certainly the action is here in World Championship Wrestling. And as you and all the people out there know, to be number one in professional wrestling, you got to stay on top of it. You got to be a winner, and you got to go where the action is and where the best is. And that's why I'm back here.
May I ask you this, because I've never seen you wearing a glove before, and I heard that you've had suffered a hand injury. Is that correct?
That's correct, Gordon. I wear the glove on my hand to guard against any further injury to an already injured hand. I have recovered from it, but not to the point where I can go without the glove.
I see. Well, I've noticed one other thing, too. You seem to be a lot more aggressive than you used to be.
Gordon, the old saying, Leah DeRocher said it, nice guys finish last. And all you people here, and you know, 6 years ago here, right here in this studio, I was dropped on my head. Why? And in the hospital, why? Because I was a nice guy. I hurt this hand because I was a nice guy. Well, there's only one way to be on top and to take the money, and that's be a winner. And as far as I'm concerned, the only way to stay on top is win. And whatever that takes is exactly what I'm going to do.
Ted, your return promo here was a lot of fun, and it's kind of hard to tell right out of the gate if you're a heel or a baby face. Gordon referenced your added aggression here, though, so the seeds were definitely being planted for a big heel run. Ted, I guess the first question I have to ask you about is Gordon. Jim Ross considers him one of the best. I know that a lot of people say Lance Russell is one of the best, but I mean, if you had to select one, Ted, who's your greatest of all time? Jim Ross?
Yeah, I think, well, yeah, Jim, I mean, like, Jim was groomed by Bill Watts. So, yeah, I think Jim was one of the best of all time.
Hard to get much better than Jim. That's
yeah,
for sure.
because, I mean, he didn't just, he knew the story behind the match.
Yes.
Whatever the match was. And so, obviously, that helped him call the match in a way where, you plant things in the fans that you want them to think.
The other interesting thing about Jim is that even if a match had a bad story or a story that wasn't quite working, he kind of bring the best out of it. Where the way that he would put it over and react, it worked.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, joining Gordon on commentary during this match is Ollie Anderson, who we touched on a little bit before there. He's booking GCW at this time. I've heard a lot about Ollie over the years, Ted, and not all of it is positive. I'm wondering what your relationship with Ollie was like.
I never had any problem with Ollie, but of course I wasn't around Ollie that often.
Okay.
And I don't think Ollie had a chance to book me very much, that's for sure. Because like when I was going into Atlanta, he was just leaving.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be shortly after you arrived. I want to say it was going to be around spring or maybe just early 1984. He'd be gone.
Yeah.
Do you remember if you had a lot of input when you're coming in the doors to the direction of your character or what you're going to be doing, or is it just you show up, they tell you what to do, and that's that?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't think anybody, I don't care who you were, had a lot of input as to what your character does. I mean, you might have some, like especially when I became the $1 Million Man, that type of thing. Obviously, there's going to be some input there, and some, but like I just don't remember ever having to have that conversation with anybody about, what I was going to do or how I was going to do it. I mean, what I was going to do in terms of who's going to win, who's going to lose, and input on. You can have input on the match, like hey, how about we do the finish this way or that way? But whether you were going to win or you were going to lose was never your choice.
I work on Arn Anderson's podcast as well, and he says all the time, I didn't know I could say no. Somebody would just tell him to do something, and he'd say, well, that's, even if it was bad, he'd think to himself, like, well, that sucks, but I'm just going to go give it my best.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, well, and that's just it. It's like, okay, if you don't want to do what I tell you, there's the door.
Back in the day when the promoters had all the leverage, right?
That's right.
All the leverage. Our pal Jake Roberts returns to Georgia at this time, and he's about to start a big run as a member of Legion of Doom and have some of his greatest matches of his career against Ronnie Garvin. So I know that you and Jake had spent a little time together before when he was just a young man in the business, and I think that he was a ref for a couple of your matches back in the day. I know that you regard him as, you know, one of your greatest opponents ever, one of the guys that you love working with the most. I mean, he's still pretty young here at this time, but now all of a sudden he's going from just being like kind of a generic cowboy type character to this kind of like really sinister, you know, sleazeball type dangerous guy. Wondering if you started to see the early potential in Jake around this time.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, I always saw potential in Jake, but when he, it's like, I mean, I think Jake, give him my microphone. Jake can do anything. He is great on the microphone. Absolutely, hands down, one of the best, bar none.
Hard to compare Jake to anybody because he was just so damn good. It was so effortless for him all the time.
Yeah, and just the way he would explain things and make you think, it was great. Obviously,
super outside the box.
Amen.
Well, if there was any mystery surrounding whether or not you were a heel, all that went out the window the following week. You would ruthlessly beat up an enhancement guy and refuse to pin him so you can inflict more punishment. And after the match, you call out Tommy Rich, and it'll kick off a rivalry that fans ask about all the time online on our Ask Ted Anything posts. Ted, prior to this, had you ever met or spent any time with Tommy Rich?
Not a lot. I mean, I when I first went to Atlanta, I think Tommy wasn't there when I first got there, and then he came back. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean that's the way I remember it. And I mean, I hit it off with Tommy from the get-go. And I saw his talent. I mean, charisma. Oh yeah, I mean, he had it all. Good on the microphone. Good in the ring. Yeah, I don't have anything negative to say about Tommy.
No, and that's pretty much the sentiment from everybody. Is just like, man, great guy, hell of a worker. It's and I mean, this rivalry that you guys are about to start here is going to be iconic. But first, Ted, you had a little business to take care of in Japan. So to explain your absence, GCW has a fun angle at the Omni, which we'll watch back as our final clip this week.
Everybody from time to time gets carried away, but Ted DiBiase is just taking it to the nth degree. We're going to see a little film here involving he and Tommy Rich, and we'll be talking about it. And you'll see that DiBiase has just gone to great lengths to destroy Tommy Rich. And in the process, he's caused himself little problems. You remember Gordon before he said a $5,000 or $2,000 or whatever it happened to be fine he didn't care about. Well, he's got another fine levied on him for $5,000. But in addition to that, he's been suspended from World Championship Wrestling for a period of 30 days.
And here's exactly why. Now watch, Rich gets him into an inside cradle. He starts the count. It was only a 2 count. But now watch DiBiase as he comes back after Rich, using the flat of the foot. At this point in time, these two men have been on a pretty fair and equal exchange. But we're going to see in just a couple of moments the transformation in this man, DiBiase, the kind of individual that he has become, and win at any cost. And that's exactly what he has in mind here again. The referee warning him about you.
Watch right here, Gordon. You'll see him start to adjust that glove. Now, actually, there's nothing in itself that's incriminating except the fact that he's doing it. When we tried to check it or anybody was after it, he wouldn't let anybody come close to that glove. He refused to come to the Board of Inquiry. There was only one choice left. He cannot tolerate that sort of activity, and he was then suspended. Just keep on watching. Right now, he's not satisfied that the match is over. Tommy Rich is on the outside.
And another adjustment on that glove, too.
Yes, you're right. Now, here comes Ted DiBiase on the apron. At first, as I spoke to the referee, he said he thought DiBiase at least was going to respect the fact that Tommy was on the outside. As you can see, that was an erroneous assumption. He pushes the referee, another violation. It's just one after another as far as Mr. DiBiase is concerned.
And yet the man is an outstanding athlete. This is the shame of the situation that he has such an impressive background as an amateur, and up until his recent return here to World Championship Wrestling was a highly respected, well-qualified competitor. Now, bodily manhandling the referee, and the second referee comes in. Now the ring begins to fill up with men who are concerned about the situation. Tommy Rich has faced a crimson mask, and again, It's DiBiase now delivering a pile driver after the match is over, after the bell had rung, and after other men had tried to restrain him. And, of course, this is what led to the suspension and the $5,000 fine. And certainly, I think World Championship Wrestling was absolutely correct.
So there it is. You're gone, and yourself and Tommy are perfectly set up to continue the rivalry when you make your return. But a really perfectly done angle here. You know, you wind up getting a lot of heat on Tommy. You kind of go a little bit overboard there in the Omni. And as a result, you are suspended from GCW, which will explain your absence there in All Japan really perfectly.
Yeah.
Ted, you'd returned to All Japan on the 30th of September to score a victory over Mighty Inoue in the Giant Series, and that topic will be something we'll go on to discuss very soon here on the show. For now, though, Ted, I'm curious. We know that you'd go on to make some huge money in Japan as a tag team partner for Stan Hansen, but at this time, what was the incentive in doing a tour there? I mean, you had just returned to GCW and were getting really heavily featured on national TV, so I'm wondering if you can talk to us about the motivation for another Japan run.
Well, I mean, money. The $1 Million Man's talking again. I mean, you know, like when you went on tour in Japan, the only thing you paid for was your food.
Wow.
Everything else, your hotel, transportation, everything, airfare, hotel, everything else was paid for. All you bought was your food. And the money aspect of going to Japan. You know, I can remember when I was making $1,000 a night. You know, that was about the time I was with Hansen when that was going on. But the incentive it's kind of like I mean, the first time I went to Japan, I think I made $1,000 a week.
Okay.
But I didn't spend anything except food.
Yeah.
The only money I spent out of pocket was to eat. I mean, so you go make some money and you can save most of what you make because you don't have to spend much. It's great, you know.
That makes a big difference.
You weren't, you know, each, like the baby faces had a bus and the heels had a bus. And you get on your bus and you go. You don't have to worry about driving. You don't have to worry about, you know, how many miles is it and where are we going and all that other stuff. You just get on the bus and ride.
Pretty good arrangement, I gotta say.
Yeah, I loved it.
And yeah, it's even if you were only making $1,000 a week here at this time, it's like, okay, but if you're not spending any money the whole time that you're there, except for on food, man, you're gonna wind up coming home with a chunk of change.
The time I'm talking about is like the first time I went to Japan. Okay, I started the summer of '75, and it was a year. I think about a year later. So I think my first trip to Japan was either in '75 or '76, and I was just a young guy, and I wasn't anybody that was figured in at the time. But it was just a great opportunity. The first time I went on a 5-week tour. So, you know, like, you know, I made $5,000. Well, that's 1970, 75 or 76. That's making $5,000 without spending anything except what you eat. You know, so that was pretty good. That was like, you know, I couldn't do that at home.
And $5,000, I mean, $1,000 a week in 1976 is some really, really good money.
Yeah.
So yeah, certainly understandable why you go over there. Plus, it's a new country, and I love sushi, so I'm sure I would have loved it.
Yeah, and of course, you know, again, the funk influence. I mean, the Funks, I think, by and large, booked All Japan Pro Wrestling for Baba. In other words, they were the bookers of the American talent that went to Japan for Giant Baba, for All Japan Pro Wrestling. And then, you know, because All Japan was it. And then the guy Inoki is the wrestler who broke away from All Japan and started New Japan. So then there were two promotions. I never worked for Inoki. I always worked for Giant Baba.
And man, a lot of history there, and we'll cover some of it here coming up on the show. That's going to do it for this week, and we will be back next week with another show. But before we go, I do want to remind you all that if you'd like to get this podcast on video with no commercials and get access to a ton of sports, entertainment, and other shows, get over to premierstreamingnetwork.com, sign up for Premier Plus. If you're a wrestling fan or just a fan of sports in general, you're just going to love what they're doing over there. I can pretty much guarantee it. Again, it's premierstreamingnetwork.com. If you're enjoying our show and you're listening on your podcast app, please do us a favor and like, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review. That helps out Ted and I a bunch. Also, follow Ted at MDM Ted DiBiase on his social media. Follow me at Marcus P. D'Angelo on X, and follow Premier Streaming Network at Watch on Premier on X and at Premier Streaming Network on Instagram and Facebook. Ted, a fun look back here 40 years to your final days in Mid-South in 1983 and a new journey there in Georgia.
Awesome. Very good. I enjoyed the ride.
Well, I can't wait to do more of it with you next week, my friend.
I can't either. But until then, just remember, everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
We'll catch you guys next time right here on Everybody's Got a Pod.